Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Williams. I know some of you all here in the room, so it's nice to see and know that you're there and present. I have worked with Craig for several years. He runs Home Tax Shield, and they are a company that help you protest your property taxes. And that's the appraised value that gets set by the county at the beginning or middle part of the spring, if you will. And
Mhm.
I used to protest my taxes on my own each year, and I've been in real estate for 20 years now. And so for the first maybe 10 years, did it on my own. And then when the market started to escalate and prices went way up, and the way that the county did appraisals changed a little bit, and that became very difficult to use sales comparables to help myself protest. And so I said, well, if I'm having a hard time doing this, and I'm a real estate agent who sees comps all the time, I'm just going to toss it to the professionals. And so then that's when we tossed it to the professionals. And Craig has been helping, his company's been helping us protest our taxes for the property tax value for years at this point. So he is skilled. He's going to walk us through maybe some why do you need to protest, how you protest, how the county comes up with a value, because they come up with a value very differently than the way I, as a real estate agent, come up with a value, or a mortgage appraiser comes up with a value. The county does it differently, which therefore makes it very challenging for a normal person, even someone like me who has the skill set, to protest. So I'll let you take it away. And then at the end, we'll do Q&A. If you are not able to come on and speak, then just type your question into the chat.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for having me again. And thanks everybody for spending some time to talk about, unfortunately, a very boring subject, but it's near and dear to my heart. I kind of fell into this property tax world just before COVID. And when I realized it was like a really big data problem, that's those kind of things for me, just I can't stay away from them. So ended up solving a lot of the problems and building Home Tax Shield on the back of that. And that's what we're here to help do. But one of the things that we have found very early on in our process is that we've made education a huge component of what we do. The reason we did that is because the amount of misinformation out there and just lack of understanding, really, if anything, is so pervasive that we wanted to help people get a little bit smarter on a very complex topic to the extent they want to spend time doing that. So that's why we're here today. I like to do these, kind of pretty quick. I've got some slides I'll run through that help just share some really key points and talking points that I want to make sure that I cover. And some of those that I go through, you may have questions on. So just jot those down or put them in chat or wherever, and we can definitely cover it. But most of the time that we'll spend together, I hope, is really in Q&A. That's where I find a lot of people get kind of their confusion answered and learn a little bit more about the process and the counties and so forth. And we do have some things that have changed this year relative to last year that I'll cover as well. So, and those are really important to know. But let me go ahead and see if I can get this going and share. Boom. All right. Would somebody confirm y'all can see the slide?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Good. Okay. Um, all right. This is me and us. Just to give a little street cred, this is who we are and what we've been doing since 2020. We're pretty much in most major county in the state at this point. We came to market with a very low fee model compared to kind of traditional tax firms that some people have heard about because we really wanted to make our approach and process and technology available to every homeowner, regardless of whether they think they can afford it. So we're down in that very low fee range for sure. High high process, high data, very tenured people, low fees. That's us. And we bring a lot of technology and innovation to bear that we'll talk a little bit about. But these are just some of our stats from the last few years. And we've done quite well, saved people a lot of money, which makes me super happy. And we get every county's a little bit different, and so we're very transparent with our stats and our data. And so like that 84% success rate is statewide, but when you dig into some of our specific counties, we have 97, 98, 99% success rates in some counties, which is pretty awesome. So we're that helps me understand we're doing a great job. Got the right people, got the right data. And this is the stat that basically got me into the business, other than the fact that this is a big data problem, and that is that still today, too many homeowners are not protesting their property taxes, and it's a shocking amount of people that don't do this for all sorts of different reasons. But that's our mission and our passion is to try to get as many of those off the sidelines into the protest process, whether they hire us, do it themselves, hire somebody else. It is the right thing to do as a property owner, even if you have exemptions, which we'll talk about in a few slides. So one of the basics that drives this whole industry is deadlines. And there are a couple of deadlines that you just cannot and should not miss. The most important one is actually not the protest deadline. It is the pay your taxes deadline by January 31st. Never miss that deadline. Otherwise, your life will get very painful very fast when it comes to your home and your taxes. January 31st. Second most important deadline is May 15th. And that's the deadline to protest your taxes every year. And that is next Friday, I believe. So we are at the deadline. And that there is nothing that you can do, nothing that we can do even to help somebody get filed past the deadline. So it's just not something you want to miss. And then, there's some other key dates. Like Kristen mentioned, the preliminary value notices typically come out in early April. We typically run our hearings in June and July. Sometimes we'll take it into August if the county's just not budging. We'll push it into August, but we try to wrap things up usually in the summer. And then the property tax bills usually get delivered in the November, December timeframe, either to the homeowner themselves or to their escrow agent. And in terms of why to protest, obviously you can save some money, so that's a big reason. But philosophically, one of the things that I've noticed in talking with thousands of homeowners the past few years, in terms of the ones that aren't protesting and getting them converted over to do that, most homeowners are shopping either to hire an agent or they want to go protest to save money. But what they really are trying to figure out is the value that the county gave them fair. That's the underlying question that you can't answer unless you go protest. And so one of the things that we talk a lot about is like don't look at your value and just think that yeah, I think this is pretty fair. I'm okay this year. I don't want to bother. You would be shocked at how often we get a reduction on a value that we actually think is fair too, but we still go try with our data and our people and are quite successful, even if you think it's fair. So, and one of the other things I like to mention too is, helping your neighbors. This is a team sport, meaning that if you're the only one in your neighborhood that's protesting, you're going to have a really hard time getting any success. And so it's best to get all your neighbors involved in somewhere. Again, have them do it themselves, hire us, hire somebody else. But the more people that protest, the more corrections can be made across the whole neighborhood. So this has become my favorite slide because it is chock full of just misunderstandings about real estate. And Kristen did a great job hinting at this early on in our conversation. But there is a really weird mind twister when you see that your home has 10 different valuations. They're all different and they're all correct. And that's odd to think about, but we went ahead and listed them here. so that you can get the full view of like, well, what are all these different values and why are they different? And when you dig into them, it really comes down to two things. The first one is how the value is generated. And the second one is who is using the value and for what. And so when you kind of look at these values from those two lenses, then you will see why they're different. But like what for buy sell transactions, for example, which is where a lot of real estate agents live and where all of us homeowners live in terms of kind of monitoring our market and trying to keep track of where my value is, you're either wearing your buyer hat or you're wearing your seller hat, or if you've actually got a deal, then you're doing a transaction. And so all of those values can be different at any given time in the market. You might be willing to sell your home for a number, but I might not be willing to pay that number. And so in the real estate world, the normal real estate world, those are the three values that most professionals kind of live with and breathe with, and that's what drives their daily business. And then when it comes to buying and owning a home, then you've got these other ones where the lenders care about the value, but they want to do it a certain way. And then you have insurance companies that look at replacement value or insurance value, and sometimes those are different. Certainly can differ by insurance company because they all have their different appraisal models and they like to do it themselves. And then we get down to the four different values that are in the property tax world. We'll go through each one of these, but the appraised value, that is the value that you actually protest. The assessed value is the value you pay your taxes on, but a lot of people get confused that we're supposed to go in and protest their assessed value, and that is not how the Texas property tax code and laws are written. So we protest the appraised value. Now, if in protesting the appraised value, if we don't end up saving you money on your taxes, if we don't get your assessed value lower also, then you won't save any money. And in our case, the way our firm charges fees, we wouldn't charge you any fees for that. But let's dive in a little bit more into the four property tax values, and they are all on this chart. And so this is how the county runs their appraisal models. They actually come up with two different values first, and it's called the equity value and the sales value. Now, equity does not mean equity like how much of the home is owned by the owner. In this case, equity means equal and uniform. And it is a state law that the county must appraise your home in an equal and uniform manner to all other homes in your neighborhood. And so they do that. They have a model that does that, and it comes up with a specific value just for that equity value. They have another model that uses the sales information that they have to come up with a sales value. And counties do get sales information through all sorts of means, usually surveys and other things, but they will have some sales information and they will use that, whatever they have, to try to determine what their sales value for your home might be. They take those two values and they end up it's not an average, or it's a little murky in terms of how they get to their appraised value, but they look at both of the equity value and the sales value, and their models come out with what they think is a fair appraised value. And that is what they put on your appraisal notice. And that starts the whole game. That number right there, the 560. So this chart kind of continues down that process, assuming we protest for you and we get a $60,000 reduction off the 560. And if you have the homestead, right, then you get another $140,000, what I call credit to your value, to the 560. And you end up with an assessed of 360. And that is what you actually pay taxes on when you get your tax bill. You'll see all these values, and particularly the 360 times whatever tax rate for every one of your taxing entities, and that comes up with your total tax due. So this is kind of a very high level view into the county's processes and into their systems and how they derive values, how they use them. And here's kind of the most important part. Like when we go argue against that 560, if we just try to argue against the 560 with some some data or some other argument, we might find some success. But when we dive in to the equity value and the sales value, and we go attack those two values, then we have much greater success at actually changing the 560 because that's how the county built their models. So we go in at the ground level. We don't just attack the 560. We go in at the ground level and kind of reconstruct the county's models to be more favorable to the homeowner. That's how we as professionals do it. That's a very difficult thing for a non-tax professional to do. And even taking sales comps in doesn't quite check that box because you're kind of only playing in that sales value game. You're not addressing the equity value game, which is a whole nother way to get the value lower. So this is the county's view and kind of what happens. Um, so let's talk about what we or what you should do in terms of doing a protest the most correct way. File by May 15th. That obviously is the most important thing. And then start preparing. Once you file a protest, by law, you can ask the county for all of their data, the equity and the sales data, on your home, and they have to give that to you. So highly recommend you do that. You're going to get, in some cases, 10 to 15 to 20 page document about your home with all that information on it. And then you need to go in and start picking apart their data and their case. You can pick apart the sales case and maybe come up with other sales comps that are different or better. But you have to adjust those comps the same way the county does. And I'm going to show you an example of what that means next, and that's really important. And then you can go pick apart their equity comp data as well. And so you can go after both or one of those arguments, and then figure out which one is going to help you the most. There are a couple other things that a lot of homeowners that DIY protest bring. That they'll bring photos, and those can help sometimes. And maintenance repair estimates sometimes help as well. But I will be very candid with you that most of the time, none of that stuff helps except two things: foundation repairs, which is major, and entire roof replacements. If the home needs either one of those two things are almost always accepted by the county because they're high dollar items, and so you can bring those in to help. But we get a lot of people that want to show us pictures of their, their house that needs to be painted or their fence that fell down or whatever it is. And unfortunately, the reality is none of that stuff actually really helps all that much. So we don't really pay a ton of attention to that.
I
Once
have
you got all your stuff ready to go, oh, go ahead, Kristen. You have a question?
no, I realize I should hold my question to the end, so it's
That's
okay.
okay. No, if it's pertinent, jump in.
Well, if you need a roof replacement and then you convince them that you need a roof replacement or foundation repair, and then you get the work done, do they raise your value like the next year after that's been done?
So that's a great question. So they have to value your home as of January 1st. Okay. So if you replace your roof before January 1st and you give them your receipt, they're not going to give you a reduction on your home because as of January 1st, you had a new roof.
Right.
So the only time this works is on January 1st, or right thereafter, you get an estimate from a roofer or foundation repair company that says, it's going to cost, $47,000 to replace this roof. You can take that in to your protest and they will make some adjustments to your value that year. But yes, the next year, since you will have likely replaced your roof, your value will probably go back to where it was before they reduced it.
Okay.
So they will raise it, but they won't necessarily like raise it more than where it was just because you have a new roof. Okay,
Got it.
good
Okay.
question. So after you get all your stuff together and you're ready to rock and roll, then you can call the county and sometimes they'll talk with you in an informal basis, which is, either a phone call or a video call or maybe even over email, and you might get them to move, quickly and easily. And if it's a number you're happy with, you can take it and go home. If you're not happy, then you have to go to the formal review board, which is a little bit more arduous, and you get scheduled for that. And you get to go present to the board, three people usually, and but that the county gets to present also. So you're presenting, and then the county presents, and the board decides who is more correct. And once they decide, that's it. Like that was your chance for that year. You do technically have an opportunity to either file a lawsuit at that point or file arbitration. That can be very expensive and take a lot of time as well. But so usually the ARB is the kind of the final show. So let's talk about those adjustments that I mentioned. That this is one of the things that most non-tax professionals aren't even aware of, that this happens. And I've been looking for this for a while. I finally found a sales grid in our world from a case up in Dallas last year that makes this point as to why sales comps, raw sales comps brought into a protest can be very dangerous. Okay. So we harp on that, and we highly discourage homeowners from bringing raw sales comps into their protest, and we discourage real estate professionals from sharing raw sales comps with their owners because they think it might help them. But let's go through this case example because this is actually what can happen. So you can see in the middle of the screen, we have the sales prices from these three comps, that came out of the MLS system. And when you look at the county proposed value at 790 up there, then you would think, well, certainly the first two comps would be great. Those comps would help me. The other comp is pretty close to 790, but it's not going to hurt me that bad. But look what happens when you do the required adjustments to each sales comp for property taxes. Again, this only happens in property taxes. It doesn't happen in all the other values. Every single one of these comps hurt the owner. It ruined their case, that now they have no chance. They're basically telling the county there's no chance. So if you take the raw comp in thinking you're going to win, and the county's going to politely say, sorry, you don't have a case there. And it's going to sound very confusing to you because you're going to look at, well, it says 735, so why don't I have a case? This is why. And this is the kind of thing that a good tax professional is doing on every single property that they bring evidence into. So in our world, we don't let any comps into the case, into the conversation that hurt the owner. So I created this sales grid, but this sales grid would never find the light of day in our negotiations with the county because it clearly will not help, right? So that's a very important and very, very not known part of property taxes.
Well, and that is the reason why I hire you guys to help me is that I did use actual sales comps, but the county is very evasive at sending you the packet, the evidence packet. So I went
Yeah.
in without an evidence packet. I think I had requested it because I knew you were supposed to, but it never showed up. So then my hearing happened, and they were using, it was the class, the way that they classify the class. And so properties were in different classes, and they made adjustments differently than I would make an adjustment with sales comparables. And it did hurt me in that case. And so, yes, that's where I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay away from pulling comps from people because
Yeah.
you have the evidence package and you can really dig into all the data and look at the data from all the different angles. It
Mhm.
may not be beneficial to the homeowner.
Yeah. And I think, Kristen, that's one of the most frustrating things for homeowners and real estate professionals because when you look at all these things in the county's data about your home and on this grid, there's a lot of little data items. There's 15, 20, 30 more that aren't on the grid that are still in the county's data system about your home. We look at all of them. And so does the county. So for property taxes, you kind of have to look at all of them to really figure out what's going on here and how do I build a case against it. And I think one of the really frustrating things to people is the county will change certain things about your home from year to year that don't make any sense, whether it's a class code or a condition code or something like that, but they, by law, they have the right to run their property tax appraisal models however they want to do it. They are required to do it in a defendable and equal and uniform manner. And that's where we come in. And if they don't do it right, we will catch them and fix the value and get a reduction. And so the counties have a lot of leeway in how they run their models, what data they use, what class codes they apply, and they can change them year to year. And it's very confusing to the average homeowner. But this is the game that we play and we watch very, very closely and carefully. I will also say that despite what many homeowners believe, we have never seen a single county do anything that I would consider nefarious, right? They are just playing the game the way that they are allowed to play the game by law, and it's just confusing. And so people start to feel like it's nefarious. So I totally get that perception, but we obviously see deep into their systems and deep into the data, and we watch this stuff very carefully. And in most cases, these counties, they're not nefarious. They're not trying to pull one over people. They're not changing things illegally. They're doing things the way that they're supposed to, and they do a good job. And one of the things that you may have experienced, Kristen, in your time of realizing maybe I shouldn't do this anymore, they get better and better and better every single year, the counties. And that makes it harder and harder and harder to find success in a protest unless you really dive in deep into their models and find ways to fix problems. So we see them getting better and better every year, and we expect they will only get better and better every year, which means the margin for reductions is only going to shrink the better and the better they get. Yeah. Um, Quick note on if you hire somebody, there's some of my personal pet peeves on here, so I'll try to keep it non-emotional. But there's a lot of firms out there that will give you huge savings estimates to get you all excited. Please don't fall for that. They're just trying to get you to sign up. Um, they cannot guarantee savings. There's some firms that dance the line on that. It sounds like a guarantee. By law, they're not allowed to do that. One thing that I know, there's a lot of firms that have a $0 upfront policy. Totally fine with that. And from a pricing standpoint, that's not what we do. And this is why, because a lot of firms I've seen that charge nothing up front, their tax professionals, from an incentive standpoint, really don't have any incentive to work on your case unless they can see a pretty easy reduction. If they don't see an easy reduction, they're not going to work on your case. It's as simple as that. And you might feel like you're getting a job done, but you're not really getting a job done. And then the last thing is, I personally even get lots of letters from my competitors, and they put savings estimates and tax calculations on my, and almost all of them get my tax rate completely wrong. So just beware what you get and what you see and what looks good and so forth. So because there are a lot of good firms out there, and there are some you definitely want to avoid. So let's talk a little bit about exemptions, which, other than protesting, exemptions are the number one way to keep your property taxes low. And the homestead exemption in particular has exploded in value. It's awesome. And I think it's probably going to go up again next year. But right now we're at $140,000 credit that you get. In the first year you own the home. Now it's prorated. So if you bought the home on July 1st, you'll get half the credit. But still, like that's a big, that's a big chunk of savings for homestead exempt folks. You can see too, another very confusing part is, in addition to the credit, you also have a cap. But your cap doesn't really come into play unless the county tries to raise you by more than 10%. So everybody has a cap technically, but your cap won't help you until the year the county tries to raise you by more than 10%. Then it helps you. So Kristen, you mentioned we're coming out of a really robust real estate 2 or 3 or 4 years, and now we're kind of plateauing. And now what's happening, particularly in Travis County, is people are losing their cap. Well, they don't really lose their cap, but the cap went away because it's no longer triggered. And so that's what people are seeing is, the 10% is not getting triggered anymore. And so they're seeing that cap number go away. You still have a cap. The county, if they try to raise you by 10% again, it'll get triggered on the homestead. For over 65, they get an additional $60,000 in a credit. So 200,000 total, which is awesome. So, anybody with an over 65 exemption and a home that's anywhere near $200,000 is basically paying no taxes in Texas, no property taxes. That's awesome. Um, a lot of the taxing entities, like a school, for over 65 people are frozen, but not all of them. This is a very common point of confusion. They think, over 65 people think, well, my taxes are frozen, so I don't have to worry about it or do anything. And that is partially true. Your school taxes are frozen, but sometimes your other taxes can and still will go up. And so we still encourage over 65 people to protest. We actually give them a 50% discount if they sign up with us. So they're hardly paying us anything. But we still know we can save them some money every year. And back to the team sport idea, we would love over 65 people to be protesting, because imagine being a homeowner on a street where you're the only one without an over 65 exemption. Nobody's protesting except you. That's going to be a pretty tough hill to climb. In terms of what's changed, that 140 for the homestead and the 60 for the over 65 did just change this past year. So that was raised. I am expecting that will get raised again in 2027. We'll see how high they go. And then yet for a third session in a row, the state is buying down school taxes. So what that means is the state is basically giving school districts a lot of money. And so then the school districts don't have to have a high tax rate because they have a lot of money from the state. So they get to have a lower tax rate. Now, the schools are very adept at finding other ways to spend the money and raise the rates back up. And that's part of the argument and the game going on right now between the school districts and the legislature. But that's outside my area of expertise. And then the other thing that changed that's actually expiring this year is what the industry insiders called a circuit breaker. So a 20% circuit breaker was intended to be for people that own properties, homes or commercial properties that are less than 5 million that don't have a homestead. So if you don't have a homestead, then you're not protected by the 10% cap. The circuit breaker was attempting to be a 20% cap for the people that don't get homestead. And that has been in place for this will be the third year. It's currently set to expire, and we'll see if in 2027 the legislature decides to extend it, make it permanent, or just go ahead and let it expire. And I think it'll be the latter, but we'll see. But you can rest assured that all of your brave legislators are going to be telling you they're going to do something for your property taxes in 2027. That is guaranteed. All the way up to full elimination of property taxes. That's what some of them like to talk about. So I just updated this chart today, so you can get a real-time view from 2023, 4, 5, and now 2026, what we have seen in some counties. This is only a handful of our counties, what the counties have done with preliminary values on a year-over-year basis. So obviously 2022 and 3 were ginormous increase years. And now 2024 was still an increase year, but starting to settle off. And then 5 and 6 are starting to plateau a bit. You can see where some of the big counties are coming out. A lot of the county, our average this year is the lowest increase on average that we've seen in 5 years, 0.9% on average increase. And so you'll also notice that Williamson County, while everybody else went up in 2023, they were down 10 and they're down 4 this year. They are one of the better counties with the data. So it is very difficult to get reductions in Williamson County. Um, so, and then you can see that in their preliminary appraisals every year. So, interesting to see, this is supposed to follow the real estate market, but it is actually 9 to 18 months behind the actual real estate market. And that's another very big point of confusion. Is all of us homeowners and real estate professionals, we think of here and now and what is my value now, but the county thinks of your value based on January 2021, and they can use all the data from the last year. They don't think about data now. They think about last year. And so there's a big gap in between now and what the county comes up with. And that's also a big point of confusion for folks. All right, quick summary slide and we'll get into Q&A. I've covered some of these things. We talked about CMAs and comps. Choosing comps is just like Kristen, you hinted at. Choosing comps for property tax purposes is actually a very different process than the way other folks do comps, whether it's for a buy sell or a mortgage or an appraisal. And so you can't just look at your neighbor's value and look at and say it's lower, so mine should go lower too. It's far more complex than that. Big frustration point for homeowners for sure. We talked about the new paint and AC and kind of minor things, not going to help much in your protest. They don't look at that. Um, we talked about your view of your appraisal value. Again, you might think it's fair. It's still worth a shot to get it even lower. Exemptions, big time tax savings for sure, but they do not necessarily remove the need or the opportunity for you to protest and get it even lower. So still protest if you have exemptions. And again, we talked about the state giving local schools and taxing entities lots of money. They're continuing to do that. Getting your value lower doesn't really hurt your budgets of your local taxing entities. It certainly doesn't hurt your resale value. There's no decent real estate agent I've met that's worth their salt that would ever consider the county's value as something that they would lean on for buy or sell. As we talked about, there's a whole different process real estate professionals follow to answer that question. Still an old one out there. The county used to be able to raise your value if you protest, and that was a long time ago, 10, 15 years. They can't do that anymore. So that's literally no risk. And then I hope kind of some of the details we provided about the grids and the adjustments and the comp selection. It's to do it right. It is a very intense process, and it's not just as easy as people sometimes think that we just like click a button, file a protest, get a result, and go home. It is not that at all. There's a lot to it, for sure. So that is all the talking points I have for now. So if we want to open it to Q&A, if I talked about something that you think I'm wrong or if it's confusing, whatever it may be, happy to chat.
So
Or if
one
anybody has
question,
any stories. Yes, Alexander, go ahead.
yeah, so I just filed my homestead exemption on the day of the deadline to file for the homestead exemptions. And I know they said it can take like up to 6 weeks to review, process, and go through all that. That
Yep,
will still be accounted for in this year with the taxes, even though I filed that right at the deadline, right?
it will, as long as it's approved.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and the counties give you a April 30 deadline. That's a soft deadline. You can still file for a homestead now, next month. You can file it in August. You can file it in September. And the longer you wait to file it, the more the risk that they can't get it into the system in time for your tax bill. That's the risk. But it's a soft deadline that they have because they like to get all that stuff done now. But homeowners can file a home for exemptions at any time.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And then
Yep.
I'm going to ask one more question on behalf of Allie, who just had the question, because I know she bought last year, and I was looking at her value for her, um,
Yeah.
and the tax appraised value is like, oh, I can't remember the exact amount, but it's like $2,000 more than she paid for the house. And I was
Hmm.
like, you should still protest. And so my question, I guess, for you and on her behalf is, you know, I said she should protest. Do you think it's worth protesting? It's, a $2,000 difference, but, bring it down a smidge, but then that's, lowers her base for next year and, moving on. So that was my advice. And she would be able to provide her settlement statement from closing last year in order to, prove that value versus having to do like comps or does that make sense?
It does. Yes, and that when you buy a home in a given year, the next protest year, you can take your closing or settlement statement into the protest and use it, assuming you actually paid less than what the county thinks. And that will work. Most counties will accept those. Um, and that's a reasonably easy way to get it down to whatever the level you paid. There are some times where we can still run the comps and the data and the grids and everything, and we have gotten lower than purchase prices before. Because remember, the county is also by law required to appraise your home in an equal and uniform manner. Well, if your purchase price is lower than their appraisal, then you can reasonably expect to get that amount. But if they appraised your home in a bigger difference from equal and uniform from other properties, we can actually get it lower than your purchase price sometimes. Now, the odds are a lot less, and it's not going to go a lot lower. But we have seen some pretty crazy reductions, like way below the purchase price, when we've gone after the equity side of the argument. Instead of just going after that $2,000 on the sales side, there's an opportunity there. But I would say that, if you're happy with a couple $1,000 reduction, then yeah, just go do it yourself and get it fixed and get it knocked out. You'll get to experience the process once, and hopefully you never have to do it again. You'll hire us or somebody else to do it. Yeah,
Thank you.
you bet.
Do you find that there's a big difference with the age of the home? Like older homes, you tend to see a little bit more of a reduction versus newer homes?
Only if the county is not treating age correctly in their models. So, um, let's talk about the core of your question is really almost kind of goes towards comp selection. So, the best comps in the property tax world are going to be a home that's the same age, same bed, bath, same square foot, same everything for the most part, but maybe on a little bit different lot. Okay, well, then every one of those little characteristics that you move away from your home, like that home's a little older, that home's a two-story, not a one-story, they have to make adjustments in their appraisal models correctly for every one of those adjustments. And so, um, as long as they're making the age adjustments correctly, then it's not necessarily going to give the owner a better or a worse chance, if it's an older home. Now, if they're trying to compare an older home to a bunch of brand new homes, that's a pretty weak argument on their part. And we could come in and say, no, 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 you can't use all these new homes. You have to use other homes. But we don't see that very often. Counties making that grave of a mistake.
I just went ahead and posted the link to like my Kristen Williams client or agent profile. So if you all want to protest and you click that link, it'll just take you to their website. It's a very easy process. Craig, can you um, walk us through just briefly what it is to register? And before you do that, I pulled up, I have had I think 16 different clients use
Hmm.
Home Tax Shield over the last, I think we've been doing this 2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
This like this service for like our clients, like doing a webinar. And the savings cumulative for the clients that we have represented is $18,000, 820, 18,820. So those 16 clients have had a cumulative savings of 18,820 from your side. And
Nice.
which is great.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see more because I think it's so important to protest. And then I'm going to look at, from our perspective, my husband and I, we have our personal property. We have a vacation house at the coast in Rockport,
Mhm.
and then some rental properties in the area. And so, out of all those five properties, we've used you for longer, probably the last 5 years, I believe, and we've had a cumulative savings of $4,800 in our cumulative tax bills. So, I would say that's a really good proof point from a
Yeah.
helped us a lot, and so we'll take it.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that. And the other components of that I think are important to mention is, once Kristen signed up, like there's nothing else she needs to do. There's no other work involved for her. She gets to go back to her life and do stuff that she's much more passionate about and enjoys, and let us take care of it. And then again, with our model, very low, very fair fees, so we're not charging too much for doing a great job. And that's the combination we wanted to achieve is like let us take this off your shoulders. We'll do a great job. We may not get a reduction every single year. It depends on how much the county messes up in a given year. And some years they don't actually mess up that much. But if you do it year in and year out, over time, you do end up saving quite a bit of money.
Well,
And with like us, it's no work every year. Just check out how we're doing and root for us. That's it.
absolutely. Well, and I will say the reason I switched protest services, I don't know if this like policy changed, but I used a different protest service prior to, meeting you. And
Mhm.
they got a reduction in the appraised value for my house,
Mhm.
but not the assessed value. But I still had to pay a fee for them lowering the appraised value versus the assessed value, which like my taxes stayed the same, but they
Yeah.
lowered. And so I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not gonna, like, I didn't save any money on the actual tax bill.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of a like scam, and so I didn't
Yeah.
like that. Because I'm like, I didn't actually save money and I still had to pay like a pretty hefty fee for that one property that didn't save me money in my actual tax bill. So that's when I switched. And then since
Yep.
for the last several years, we've, worked with you.
Yeah, I will share that. I actually understand why they charge like that. Like as a professional tax agent, your job is to go get the appraised value lower. That's your job, and that's the only job you have. And when you do that, if you do that successfully, then you would think, well, I should get compensated for that. So I kind of understand why they do that. But we think it's a bit more fair to just charge if we get you tax savings. If we don't get you tax savings, we won't charge you. It's just a different business model and approach. And so I get why they're doing that, but I agree with you. I think this is a little bit more fair way to do it.
It's like
The
we
way that
all
we,
have skin in the game at this point.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Cool.
So, yeah, matter of fact, just to share a crazy stat, I don't know if I shared this with y'all last year. I think it was 2023 or 2024. Um, we lowered appraised values by $557 million across our portfolio that did not lower the assessed value also. And so we didn't bill anything for $557 million in lowered values.
Dang.
Again, just a philosophy. It costs us money to do that work. And so, but we just feel like that's the right and the best way to charge. And so we're willing to do that. When that doesn't happen, when that appraised doesn't knock the assessed down, that's okay. That we consider that our responsibility to try to make that happen. Yeah.
So one thought I had for you all who are attending, and then those who may be watching it on the recording, if you take my link that I posted in the chat, and I know we all have neighborhood groups. If you
Mhm.
want to just post like a very quick in your Facebook neighborhood group, hey, here is the service I'm using to help me protest my tax value. Very simple, very easy, low fee, low hassle, headache, then maybe a couple other people in your neighborhood group would actually protest. Because I know the biggest reason why people don't protest is it's just the friction that they feel like, oh, it's just a lot of hassle. I don't want to go through the effort. But
Mhm.
if you did that and more people in your neighborhood protested and then they protest on the automatic because it's like it automatically renews each year, maybe that would help, consecutive years down the road.
Yep.
Just a thought. I know I'm passionate about helping people with these kinds of homeowner things, and I know it's so hard sometimes to adult. This is like a very adult thing to do, and it's
Yes.
not easy to adult. You want to put something like this off, but it is very important. So I think for y'all on that, yeah, they're laughing at me, but it is, you know. So true. It's one of those things, but because it's like I feel like it's my personal responsibility to help people when it comes to all things home. That's why I'm
Yes.
passionate about it.
Well, and on that note, I would like to bring up one other thing that's not in my slides that when this happens, this makes me both so sad and so mad at the same time. But um, Alexander, you go by Ali? Is that right?
Yeah, I equally go by both.
Okay, just
I call
checking.
it
So,
Ellie.
so I'm gonna use you as an example, if you don't mind, at least generically. But
Oh,
so
go
when
for
a
it.
homeowner buys a home in a given year, if they buy the home from a homeowner that had exemptions in place, a homestead, over 65, or whatever. When you buy that home from somebody that has exemptions and you take it over, the year you buy the home, so for you, it would be last year, the property taxes that you pay, because you now own the home, are going to actually include the previous owner's exemptions. Okay. And then the next year, those exemptions go away. Now, you can file for homestead and get that in place quickly. But if they had a cap, your cap restarts, or if they have over 65, that goes away. And so one of the things that can happen to new home buyers is they're not prepared for that second year property tax bump. And that happens not because the county's being nefarious or anything like that. It happens because exemptions disappeared and nobody helped you understand that that can happen. And now your mortgage goes up by 500 bucks a month or whatever because now they need more money for taxes. Um, and so, new home buyers need to definitely understand that and talk with your real estate professional about that and kind of look forward. It only happens if you buy a home that has exemptions on it already. But definitely to be aware of that. I unfortunately talked to too many homeowners that have had to sell their home because they can no longer afford it and they just bought it. And it's really sad. Doesn't happen very often, fortunately, but it does sometimes.
Okay. Any
Cool.
more question? One last question? Anybody have one? All right. Well, y'all,
Awesome.
welcome to reach out to me, Ethel, Ali, Samantha. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or anybody who happens to watch the recording. I'm not an expert like Craig, but I have been through this rodeo for many, many years, and I can give you guidance and advice. So feel free
Yeah,
to reach out.
sounds great.
Okay, well, Craig, thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here for us this lovely day, and good luck during your protest season because I know
Thank you.
they're about to get very busy for you. So,
It's going to get busy. It's fun though. Yeah.
yeah, we appreciate you.
Great being with y'all tonight. Yeah, good to
Yeah,
connect.
thank you so much. All right,
Take
bye.
care. Bye.